The avoidant person ended things, created distance, or walked away from the relationship with every appearance of having moved on completely. They presented their departure as a final decision, as a necessary ending, as closure they needed to find their peace or pursue their path. They spoke with certainty about incompatibility or timing or their need for independence. They demonstrated calm or even relief at the separation. They may have quickly appeared to move on, dating others or throwing themselves into work or activities that suggested you were already forgotten. Everything about their external presentation communicated that they had let you go, that the relationship was finished in their mind and heart, that you were part of their past they'd successfully released. But beneath this carefully constructed performance of having moved on lies a different reality that the avoidant person will never openly acknowledge. They still hold your heart in silence. They still carry you with them. They still think about you more than they would ever admit. They still feel the loss, even as they pretend it doesn't affect them. The avoidant person's need to appear unaffected, to seem like they can easily release people and move forward without pain or attachment, is itself a defensive performance that hides the genuine impact you had on them and the genuine difficulty they're experiencing with your absence. They haven't let you go. They've buried their feelings about you so deeply that even they might not consciously access them most of the time, but those feelings remain active in their psychology, shaping their choices, influencing their patterns, creating the void they're desperately trying to fill or ignore. Understanding that the avoidant person hasn't actually released you despite all evidence to the contrary doesn't mean you should wait for them or hope for their return. It means understanding that their apparent ease with the ending is performance rather than reality, that their defensive structure requires them to appear unaffected even when they're deeply affected, that their silence about what you meant to them is a protective mechanism rather than an accurate reflection of your actual impact or importance. The performance of moving on while staying emotionally tethered. The avoidant person's performance of having completely moved on from you is one of their most convincing defensive displays, crafted to protect both themselves and their image from the vulnerability of admitting that endings affect them deeply. This performance serves multiple psychological functions. It maintains their identity as an independent person who doesn't need anyone. It protects them from the discomfort of sitting with loss and grief. It prevents others from seeing their emotional needs and potential dependence. And it allows them to avoid the vulnerability of acknowledging that someone mattered enough that losing them hurts. The performance is often so convincing that even people close to the avoidant person might believe they've genuinely moved on without difficulty. And you certainly see the performance in question whether you ever mattered at all. The performance includes specific behaviors and presentations that create the impression of complete closure and forward movement. The avoidant person might immediately start dating someone new, jumping into a relationship or series of casual connections that suggest they've already replaced you and moved beyond what you shared. They might throw themselves intensely into work, hobbies, social activities, or self-improvement projects that fill their time and create a narrative of productive progress rather than painful processing. They might travel, move to a new place, change their appearance, or make other visible changes that signal transformation and a new chapter rather than grief over an ended chapter. They might speak about the relationship, if they speak about it at all, with emotional distance and intellectual analysis rather than with feeling. They frame the ending as a logical conclusion to incompatibility, as necessary for both people's growth, as ultimately positive, even if difficult in the moment. They demonstrate remarkable calm or even cheerfulness when discussing the breakup, showing none of the pain or struggle that typically accompanies significant loss. They might even express relief, claiming they feel freer or more themselves now, suggesting the relationship was a burden they're glad to have released. All of these communications reinforce the narrative that they've genuinely moved on without significant difficulty. On social media and in social situations, the performance continues with carefully curated presentations of happiness and fulfillment. They post pictures of new adventures, new people, new experiences. They appear confident, social, unbothered. They might even post content that seems specifically designed to show you, if you're watching, that they're doing perfectly fine without you, that your absence hasn't created any void in their life. This performance might include quickly becoming involved with someone else in visible ways, posting couple-like content that demonstrates they've already found connection elsewhere, sending the message that you were replaceable and have been replaced. But beneath this convincing performance of having moved on completely, the avoidant person remains emotionally tethered to you in ways they cannot acknowledge or perhaps even consciously recognize most of the time. They think about you far more than they would ever admit. They compare new people to you, finding them lacking in specific ways that highlight what you provided that they now miss. They replay memories of your relationship, especially the positive moments, experiencing nostalgia that contradicts their outward presentation of relief at the ending. They wonder what you're doing, whether you're thinking about them, whether you've moved on, whether you're with someone else. This continued emotional tethering manifests in behaviors that contradict the performance of having moved on. They might check your social media obsessively, monitoring your life from a distance while maintaining no direct contact. They might ask mutual friends about you, framing the questions casually, but seeking information about whether you seem okay, whether you're dating, whether you mention them. They might drive by places associated with you, visit locations you used to go together, maintain routines or habits that keep them connected to memories of the relationship. They might keep gifts you gave them, photos of you together, messages you sent, maintaining physical evidence of the connection they claim to have released. The avoidant person's new relationships or pursuits, if they've jumped into them quickly, often reveal the tethering rather than genuine moving on. They might date people who remind them of you in specific ways, unconsciously seeking to recreate what they lost while telling themselves they're moving forward. They might sabotage new connections before they can become meaningful, protecting themselves from being hurt again, but also protecting the special place you still hold in their internal world. They might compare everyone unfavorably to you, unable to find the specific combination of qualities you possessed, the particular way you understood them or made them feel, the unique connection you shared. The performance of moving on also serves to manage the avoidant person's own internal experience. By acting as if they're fine, by keeping themselves busy and distracted, by refusing to acknowledge their feelings about the loss, they avoid having to sit with the grief and regret that lurk beneath the performance. The avoidant person is terrified of their own sadness, their own needs, their own attachment and loss. Performing strength and independence and forward progress helps them avoid confronting the vulnerability of admitting that losing you was difficult, that you mattered more than they showed while you were together, that they miss you and wish things had worked out differently, even though they couldn't make them work. This performance requires enormous energy to maintain. The avoidant person cannot fully relax into their actual feelings because doing so would collapse the narrative they've constructed about being fine, about having successfully moved on, about not needing anyone. They have to remain vigilant, ensuring they don't reveal through words or behaviors that they're still thinking about you, still missing you, still hoping in some small way that you might reach out or that circumstances might change to make reconnection possible. This vigilance is exhausting, but it feels safer than the alternative of acknowledging vulnerability and need. The tethering the avoidant person maintains is also evident in how they react to information about you or encounters with you. If they hear you're dating someone new or seem happy without them, they experience an unexpected intensity of feeling that contradicts their performance of indifference. They might feel jealousy, regret, loss, or renewed interest, emotions that reveal you still hold a significance they haven't released. If they run into you unexpectedly, they might be flustered or overly casual, their reaction revealing that seeing you affects them more than they want to admit. If you reach out to them, they might respond with more warmth or length than their performance of having moved on would suggest, unable to maintain complete distance when given an opportunity to connect again. Why they can't admit you still matter. The avoidant person's inability to admit that you still matter to them, that they still think about you, that they still carry feelings about the relationship and its ending, stems from deep psychological needs and fears that make such admission feel impossible or dangerous. Understanding why they cannot acknowledge your continued importance reveals the defensive structure that organizes their entire approach to relationships and emotions, and illuminates why genuine expression of vulnerability remains beyond their current capacity, even when those vulnerable feelings exist. The first reason the avoidant person cannot admit you still matter is that such admission would require acknowledging they need someone, that they're capable of deep attachment, that they're affected by loss, all of which contradict the identity they've built around being independent and self-sufficient. The avoidant person's entire self-concept rests on the belief that they don't need others, that they're complete alone, that they can handle anything without support or connection. Admitting you still matter means admitting this identity is false or at least incomplete, that they do have attachment needs, that they are vulnerable to being affected by others. This admission threatens the foundation of who they believe they are and who they need to believe they are to feel safe. The second reason is that admitting you still matter would mean acknowledging they made a mistake in leaving or creating distance, that they might have destroyed something valuable, that their patterns cost them a relationship that was important to them. This acknowledgement triggers shame and regret that the avoidant person cannot tolerate. They need to believe their decision to end things or create distance was right, was necessary, was the only option. Admitting you still matter means questioning that decision, facing the possibility that their fear drove them to leave something they actually wanted, confronting that their defensive patterns prevented them from maintaining a connection that could have been meaningful. This confrontation is too painful, so they maintain the fiction that leaving was easy and right rather than difficult and possibly wrong. The third reason is that admitting you still matter means admitting they're in pain, that they're struggling with the ending, that the loss affected them. The avoidant person has learned throughout their life that showing pain or vulnerability leads to further harm. Perhaps their pain was dismissed, minimized, or ignored in childhood. Perhaps they were shamed for expressing hurt or need. Perhaps showing vulnerability led to being hurt more deeply. These experiences taught them that pain must be hidden, that vulnerability must be protected, that appearing strong and fine is safer than revealing struggle. Admitting you still matter would require showing that they're hurting from the loss, and this vulnerability feels intolerable. The fourth reason is that admitting you still matter might obligate them to do something about those feelings, to reach out, to try again, to be vulnerable in pursuing reconnection. As long as they maintain the fiction that they've moved on completely, they don't have to face the fear of reaching out and being rejected, of expressing feelings and not having them reciprocated, of trying again and failing again. The silence about your continued importance protects them from having to take action that would make them vulnerable. They can maintain their feelings privately while avoiding the risk that acting on those feelings would require. The fifth reason is that the avoidant person fears that admitting you still matter would make them appear weak, pathetic, or unstable to others and to themselves. They believe people will judge them for not being able to move on, for still thinking about an ended relationship, for being stuck on someone rather than progressing forward. They judge themselves harshly for these same things, experiencing their continued feelings as evidence of inadequacy or dysfunction. To protect themselves from this judgment, both internal and external, they perform having moved on completely, even while internally they're still very much attached. The sixth reason involves the avoidant person's need to maintain control over their emotional life and over the narrative about the relationship. Admitting you still matter means admitting you still have power to affect them. that you still have importance in their emotional landscape, that they haven't achieved complete independence from the connection you shared. This admission threatens their sense of control and autonomy. They need to believe they're in charge of their feelings, that they can decide to let go and successfully do so, that others don't have power over their emotional states. Acknowledging you still matter contradicts this need for control. The seventh reason is that admitting you still matter means reopening questions about what they want and whether they're living aligned with their actual values and desires. The avoidant person typically ends relationships not because they want to be alone, but because intimacy triggers such intense anxiety that being alone feels safer. But if they admit you still matter, they have to confront whether they're actually happy with the loneliness they've chosen, whether their patterns are serving them or harming them, whether they're living according to defensive fear rather than according to what would actually make them fulfilled. These questions are uncomfortable and challenge the narrative they've constructed about their choices being right and healthy. The eighth reason involves protecting you from what they perceive as their inadequacy. Some avoidants maintain that you're better off without them, that you deserve someone who can show up better than they can, that keeping distance is a kindness because they cannot be the partner you need. Admitting you still matter would mean acknowledging they're keeping themselves from someone important to them for reasons they believe are for your benefit, and sitting with this sacrifice feels too painful. They would rather maintain the fiction that you don't matter much than admit they're maintaining distance from someone who matters deeply because they don't trust their own capacity to treat you well. The ninth reason is that admitting you still matter means admitting the loss was real and significant rather than minimizing it as they've been doing to manage the pain. The avoidant person needs to tell themselves the relationship wasn't that important, that the connection wasn't that deep, that the ending doesn't warrant significant grief. This minimization is a protective strategy that helps them function day to day without being overwhelmed by loss. But admitting you still matter means acknowledging the relationship was significant, the connection was real, the loss is substantial. This acknowledgement means feeling the full weight of the grief they've been avoiding, and they don't trust their ability to handle that grief without being overwhelmed. The signs that reveal they haven't released you. Despite the avoidant person's convincing performance of having moved on completely, there are subtle and sometimes not so subtle signs that reveal they haven't actually released you, that you still occupy space in their internal world, that the connection you shared still affects them, even though they would never openly acknowledge this. These signs are observable to anyone paying attention, and they provide evidence that contradicts the avoidant person's narrative of complete closure and successful moving forward. Recognizing these signs doesn't mean you should wait for them or hope for their return, but it does confirm that your impact was real and lasting, even if they cannot admit it. The first and most obvious sign is their continued monitoring of your life from a distance. The avoidant person who has genuinely moved on has no need to know what you're doing or how you're living. But the avoidant person who still holds you emotionally checks your social media regularly, asks mutual friends about you, maintains awareness of your life from afar. They might not engage directly, but they're watching. This monitoring reveals that you still occupy their thoughts, that they care about your well-being and what you're doing, that they haven't achieved the indifference they perform. Even if they claim they happened to see something or that friends mentioned you without them asking, the pattern of their awareness suggests deliberate seeking of information rather than passive reception of it. The second sign is how they react to information about you, particularly information about you dating someone new or appearing happy without them. If you truly didn't matter anymore, news of your life would generate a neutral response. But the avoidant person who still holds you emotionally reacts with unexpected intensity when they learn you're with someone else or thriving without them. They might become withdrawn, irritable, or suddenly more active in their own dating or social life. They might reach out to you after hearing such news, breaking a silence they've maintained for weeks or months. They might make passive-aggressive comments or posts that seem directed at you. These reactions reveal that you still affect them, that seeing you move forward triggers their feelings in ways that contradict their performance of indifference. The third sign is the pattern of who they date after you and how those relationships develop. If the avoidant person quickly moves into a new relationship, but that relationship remains surface level or ends quickly, this pattern suggests they're trying to replace you without success. If they date people who share significant characteristics with you, they're unconsciously seeking to recreate what they lost. If they sabotage new connections before they can become meaningful, they're protecting the place you still hold. If they remain single despite claiming to want a relationship, they might be measuring everyone against you and finding them lacking. The patterns in their post-relationship behavior reveal more than their words about whether they've released you. The fourth sign is their reaction when you encounter each other unexpectedly or when you reach out. The person who has genuinely moved on can interact with an ex with calm, genuine indifference or friendly neutrality. But the avoidant person who still holds you emotionally will reveal their continued attachment through their reaction to seeing or hearing from you. They might be flustered, overly casual in ways that feel performed, more talkative than necessary, or unable to maintain the indifference they've been projecting. If you reach out and they respond immediately despite claiming to have moved on, if they engage at length despite saying they've closed that chapter, if they show more warmth than their narrative would suggest, these responses reveal you still affect them. The fifth sign is what they keep and what they maintain from your time together. The avoidant person who has truly let you go disposes of reminders of the relationship, removes photos, gets rid of gifts, eliminates tangible evidence of the connection you shared. But the avoidant person who still holds you keeps certain items, maintains photos where you can't see them, holds on to gifts or mementos that carry emotional significance. They might claim they just haven't gotten around to clearing things out, but months or years later, these items remain. The keeping reveals an unwillingness or inability to completely erase your presence from their life. The sixth sign appears in how they speak about you to others when they do mention you. If they've truly moved on, their mentions would be neutral, factual, brief. But the avoidant person who still holds you might speak about you with unexpected emotion, might talk about you more than necessary, might bring you up in conversations where you're not really relevant, or they might go to the opposite extreme, refusing to mention you at all, changing the subject immediately if you come up, demonstrating through their avoidance that you're still emotionally charged territory they need to protect themselves from. The seventh sign is their timing of reaching out if they do reach out. The avoidant person who has genuinely moved on has no need to reach back out, but the avoidant person who still holds you often reaches out eventually, testing whether you're still available, checking in during difficult times when they need support, or simply unable to maintain complete distance indefinitely. The timing of these reach outs is revealing, late at night when their defenses are down, during holidays or anniversaries, after they hear you're dating someone new, during a crisis when they need support. These moments reveal that you're the person they think of when their defenses weaken or when they need something, evidence that you haven't been replaced or forgotten. The eighth sign is evident in their behavior patterns, continuing or intensifying after the relationship ends. If the avoidant person becomes more withdrawn, more focused on work, more resistant to new connections, this behavior suggests they're protecting themselves from being hurt again in ways that reveal you did hurt them by mattering and then being lost. If they become more active socially or romantically in ways that seem compulsive rather than genuine, they're trying to fill the void you left or distract themselves from missing you. The changes in their patterns, whether toward isolation or toward frantic activity, reveal they're affected by your absence, even if they deny it. What this silent holding means for your healing. Understanding that the avoidant person still holds your heart in silence, that they haven't actually moved on, despite all appearances to the contrary, that you still matter to them, even though they cannot or will not admit it, creates complex implications for your own healing and moving forward. This knowledge can be both validating and complicating, offering confirmation of your impact while potentially creating obstacles to your release and forward movement. navigating what this silent holding means for your healing requires careful consideration of how to use this knowledge without allowing it to trap you in hope or prevent your progress. The first thing this knowledge offers is validation of your experience and your perception of the connection you shared. When the avoidant person performs having moved on completely, when they appear unaffected by the ending, when they seem to have forgotten you and what you shared, it can make you question whether the relationship was real, whether the connection was genuine, whether you imagine the depth of what you experienced together. Learning that they still hold you emotionally, that you did impact them significantly, even if they cannot show it, validates that what you experienced was real. The connection was genuine. You weren't alone in feeling deeply about the relationship. This validation can be important for your healing because it confirms that you're not crazy for feeling the loss deeply when they appear not to feel it at all. However, this knowledge also carries significant risk. The risk of allowing it to feed hope that prevents your healing and forward movement. Knowing the avoidant person still thinks about you, still cares about you, still hasn't fully released you can make you believe that reconciliation is possible, that they might come back, that if you just wait long enough or remain available enough, they'll overcome their fears and return to build the relationship you wanted. This hope is dangerous because it keeps you emotionally invested in someone whose patterns make healthy relationship extremely unlikely. Regardless of how they feel about you, their feelings for you, however genuine, do not override their defensive structure or create capacity they don't possess. The knowledge that they still hold you must be processed within the larger truth that feelings are not sufficient for relationship. The avoidant person might care about you deeply, might miss you intensely, might regret losing you, and still be completely incapable of showing up in ways that would make relationship with them sustainable or healthy. Their silent holding of you is not the same as being willing or able to do the work that genuine partnership requires. It's not the same as developing capacity for vulnerability, consistency, emotional presence, and commitment. Caring about you while refusing to acknowledge it or act on it appropriately does not serve you or honor what you deserve.